Have you been asking yourself, is it just a rough patch? Or is it really time to go? You tell yourself that it's a stable job, the benefits are good, and you've built credibility here. Maybe you just need to ride it out. But that quiet feeling keeps returning, like you're slowly outgrowing the very place that once felt like a win. If this sounds familiar, then this episode is for you. Not to push you toward a decision, but to help you finally hear what your life's been trying to tell you. We're going to walk through 5 subtle but powerful signs that it may be time to leave your job. Not just as career advice, but as signals that your current season has done its job, and your next chapter is quietly asking for room to begin. As we go through each sign, ask yourself, where have I already outgrown the story that I'm still trying to live inside? Sign 1, when you have outgrown the role. A few years into my career, I stepped into a big role, managing a major oil field that had always been led by someone with decades more experience. At first, it was overwhelming. There was so much to learn. Every day brought a new set of decisions, and I spent months just trying to get a feel for the complexity. By the end of the first year, I was no longer reacting, I was leading. We exceeded our production targets, built momentum, and pulled together cross-functional teams that delivered millions of dollars in value. And by year 3, I knew that field inside out. You could wake me up at 2 a.m. and I'd still know which oil well needed what. But somewhere in that 3rd year, something shifted. Not in the field, but in me. The problems were still there, but they weren't stretching me anymore. And I started to feel it. Subtle but constant. A quiet restlessness. A sense that I wasn't being challenged. That the role was no longer pulling the best out of me. And that discomfort started asking its own question. Have I outgrown this? I felt torn. Grateful for what I had built, but restless for what I was becoming. And that's when I learned something I've never forgotten. Sometimes, the job doesn't get worse. You just evolve past it. But if you ignore that truth, if you keep showing up out of routine or fear, you risk shrinking in ways no one else will see. Sign 2, when your life changes, but your work doesn't. You see, career decisions aren't always about the work itself. Sometimes they're about life. The version of me that took that role was hungry to prove something, eager to earn trust, deliver results, and lay a foundation. But over time, life started to shift. My priorities expanded, my responsibilities deepened, and suddenly, it wasn't just about performance anymore. It was about alignment with what mattered most outside of work. For me, that meant family. My wife had supported every late night, every transition, every career stretch, and I knew I wanted to do the same for her. At a certain point, her growth became just as important as mine. And that meant I had to start making decisions that reflected both of us, not just the professional version of me. There wasn't a dramatic fallout, no crisis, but just a quiet realization that the role that once felt like a step forward now quietly clashed with the life and relationships I was genuinely trying to nurture. This kind of misalignment doesn't always show up in your calendar. It shows up in small ways. Resenting time away, rushing through moments you used to enjoy, feeling like your presence is being outsourced to ambition. And if you're not careful, you begin to treat your family like a distraction from your success, rather than the reason you're pursuing it. Sign 3, when your manager becomes a ceiling. Sometimes it's not the work that changes, and it's not that your life is pulling you in another direction. Sometimes the resistance comes from above. I remember a season when I was ready for more responsibility, more challenge, and more trust. I was delivering and I was growing. So I started asking for opportunities that would stretch me. But sadly, the support I needed didn't come. Not because I wasn't capable, but because the person above me didn't see that growth as a priority. It wasn't malicious. It was subtle. No direct criticism, no harsh words, but just a quiet indifference to my development. And over time, that does something to you. You start second guessing whether to speak up, wondering if your ambitions are too much. whether your vision of who you could become is just unrealistic. I noticed myself pulling back, not because I lacked drive, but because I didn't feel safe to expand. And that's the danger of working under someone who doesn't advocate for your growth. They don't need to tear you down. They just need to keep you small enough that they're comfortable. But when you stop asking for more, when you start reshaping your ambition to match someone else's limitations, you don't just lose momentum, you lose a little bit of yourself. Sign 4. When your body starts resisting. It wasn't just my ambition that felt constrained. After a while, I noticed something else, something quieter, but just as telling. My body had started to resist what my mind was still trying to rationalize. It crept in slowly. Sunday evenings, before the work week, felt heavier than they used to. I'd feel tight in my chest before meetings that used to feel routine. And even when I was off the clock, I wasn't at ease. I dismissed it at first, called it stress, the effect of a busy week, and a natural reaction to pressure. But the more I paid attention, the more I realized these weren't just symptoms to push through. They were signals. Because when your role is out of alignment for long enough, your body will often say what you haven't yet found words for. It might look like tension that won't go away, or fatigue that lingers even when you're sleeping well, or a general restlessness that no amount of planning can quiet. On their own, none of these signals mean that it's time to leave, but they do ask you to pause and reflect. Sign 5. When the voice won't go away. And even when your body starts to speak, there's still one signal that's even harder to ignore. The inner voice. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't interrupt meetings or break your focus during the day. But it's there, deep down within your gut. You can hear it in the stillness, in the silence, in the in-between moments. When the work is done, but something inside you still feels unfinished. For me, it wasn't a grand awakening. Just a question that kept returning in different forms. If not this, then what? And underneath that, a harder truth I hadn't fully admitted yet. You've mastered the job, but have you outgrown it? I tried to answer it the way most professionals do, with logic, reason, and strategy. I reminded myself that the job was stable, that it paid well, and that others would be grateful to be in my position. But the voice wasn't moved by my logic. It kept returning to the one thing I couldn't argue away. What it actually felt like to stay. That's what this voice does. It doesn't ask you to blow up your life. It doesn't demand a leap. It just keeps whispering, tell yourself the truth. And that was the hardest part. Not the decision itself, but admitting what you already know. Because perhaps the most important decision isn't whether to leave. It's whether you're willing to stop pretending you don't hear it. Because that moment, when you stop pretending, is where real change begins. And maybe you don't need to make a decision today, but you do deserve the space to listen, to reflect, and to tell yourself the truth about what's working and what's not. If any part of this resonated with you, you're not alone. This space exists for people like you. People who've worked hard, played by the rules, stayed loyal, and are now quietly wondering if there's more. If you'd like to stay connected, then subscribe to the channel or join the weekly newsletter at www.thefacelesscoach.com. And remember, you don't have to wait for things to fall apart to make a change. So stay grounded, remain courageous, and never again settle for second best. We at The Faceless Coach believe in you. You've got this.